Montana's Wilds, 1882, where desire could blaze through the pines or freeze a soul in the dark. In her sparse cabin, Clara Boone bared her body to save a stranger, her skin a beacon against the October frost. Wyatt Callahan, a federal marshal, lay fevered, his wound freshly stitched from a Lakota arrow's bite, his breath shallow, his body cold as death. The hearth's dim glow mocked her tattered blanket, too thin to fend off the chill. Clara, her frame sculpted by the frontier's relentless trials, full breasts, slender waist, smooth thighs gleaming in the firelight, pressed herself against him, skin to skin, under the shared threadbare cloth. Her breasts, warm and yielding, molded to his chest, stirring a primal pulse in Wyatt's half-conscious haze. He felt their weight, their softness, a forbidden spark flaring through his delirium. Her auburn hair cascaded over his shoulder, its ends brushing his throat like a whispered sin. Her fingers, calloused yet gentle, traced his jaw, tethering him to life. His hand, trembling with fever, grazed her bare hip, sending a shiver through her core, a hunger neither could name. Her green eyes, fierce with resolve, locked on his, wild with need and teetering on the edge of control. The blanket, worn and frayed, clung to their entwined forms, binding them in a fragile cocoon of warmth and danger. Hooves echoed through the pines, Silas Kane and his hunters closing in, their bloodlust thick as the night air. Clara's heart thundered, her naked skin flushed against Wyatt's, torn between saving his life and the fire their closeness ignited. She'd bared everything to keep him alive, but at what cost? Had she kindled a flame that would burn them both to ash? Tell us where you're writing from in the comments. And if this tale of raw desire and looming peril grips you, hit subscribe. Clara's fight is just beginning, and the frontier never forgives the reckless. The Montana night clung to Clara Boone's skin, its chill a reminder of the thin line between life and death. Hours before, she'd bared her soul and body to save Wyatt Callahan. She'd been alone, her rifle slung over her shoulder, tracking a deer through the pines. Her frame, lithe yet strong, moved with the grace of someone forged by the frontier. Her waist narrow, her hips swaying under the weight of her pack, a single bead of sweat tracing the curve of her neck. The forest was quiet, too quiet, when a groan broke the silence, low and pained, like a man pleading with death itself. She found him in a clearing, Wyatt Callahan, sprawled in the frost-kissed grass, blood pooling beneath him. A Lakota arrow jutted from his back, its barbed point buried deep below his shoulder blade. His face, rugged and worn, was pale as ash, but his eyes flickered with a stubborn will to live. Clara froze, her breath catching. She didn't know this man, didn't owe him her life. Yet her father's words echoed. Samuel Boone, the judge who'd taught him, her to wield a rifle and a conscience. Justice begins with mercy. To leave him was to stay safe. To save him was to invite trouble. Her fingers tightened on her rifle, her heart warring with itself. Clara knelt, her hands brushing his chest, feeling the faint thud of his pulse. His shirt, torn and blood-soaked, clung to his broad frame, and as she turned him gently, her arm grazed his side, her curves pressing briefly against him. A spark flared, unbidden, in the pit of her stomach. A dangerous pull she shoved aside. She fashioned a crude travois from branches and her coat, her muscles straining as she dragged him through the pines, her breath visible in the cold, her breasts rising with each labored step. The cabin was a mile off, and every rustle in the dark felt like eyes watching. Silas Kane's hunters, she'd later learn, tracking the blood trail. Inside her cabin, the hearth barely warmed the walls. Clara lit every lamp, their golden glow catching the sheen of her skin as she bent over Wyatt, Her fingers, nimble from years mending nets and skinning game, worked fast. The arrow's barbs made her curse under her breath, designed to tear flesh, not yield. She heated her knife in the fire, its blade glowing red, and poured whiskey over it, the sharp scent filling the air. "This'll hurt like hell," she warned, her voice steady but soft. Wyatt, barely conscious, nodded, his jaw clenched, a leather strap between his teeth. The next hour was a battle against death. Clara cut carefully, her hands slick with blood, her auburn hair falling loose, brushing her cheek as she leaned close. Her breath caught as Wyatt groaned, his body tensing under her touch, her fingers grazing his bare skin as she freed the arrow. Blood welled, but she stanched it, stitching the wound with thread and needle, her movements precise, her curves outlined by the firelight as she worked. Wyatt's eyes, feverish now, met hers for a moment, and she saw something. Gratitude, maybe, or a shadow of something deeper, forbidden. "Samuel Boone," he rasped, his voice weak. "He saved me once." Clara froze, her heart twisting. Her father's name on a stranger's lips was a wound and a tether. She bandaged him, her hands lingering a moment too long on his chest, feeling the heat of his skin beneath the cloth. But as the night deepened, Wyatt began to shiver, his stitched wound betraying him with fever. Infection had taken root, his body trembling, cold as the grave. The hearth's weak flame and her tattered blanket were no match for the Montana cold. Clara's choice was clear, though it set her pulse racing. A choice that led to the moment she'd stripped bare, pressing her naked warmth against him, their bodies entwined under that frail cloth, her heart pounding with a hunger she couldn't name. Now, as she held him, the past hours burned in her mind. Who was this man, carrying her father's name like a ghost? Why did Silas Kane's men hunt him, their hooves echoing closer through the pines? And what secret did Wyatt guard, worth dying for? The cabin creaked, the night pressing in, and Clara knew the answers would come at a cost. The Montana dawn crept through the pines, gray and merciless, casting long shadows over Clara Boone's cabin. She stood by the window, her rifle cradled in her arms, her silhouette sharp against the flickering hearth. Her frame, lean from years wrestling the frontier, tensed as she scanned the horizon, her shoulders strong, a single lock of auburn hair clinging to the curve of her jaw, damp with the night's strain. Beneath the tattered blanket, Wyatt Callahan stirred, his fever easing, but his body still weak, the stitches on his back a fragile promise of life. Her naked warmth had pulled him from death's edge, but the cost of that choice weighed heavy. Hooves had faded in the night, but Silas Kane's hunters were out there, circling like wolves. Clara turned to Wyatt, her green eyes searching his face. He was awake now, propped against the wall, his rugged features softened by pain, but hardened by purpose. "Why do they want you dead?" she asked, her voice low, cutting through the cabin's silence. Wyatt's gaze faltered, his hand clutching a folded letter tucked in his coat, the one tying him to her father, Samuel Boone. "Your pa," he said, voice rough as gravel. "He uncovered their rot." Blackthorn's gang, bribed judges, lawmen bought with blood money. I've got proof, Clara. Names. Dates. Enough to burn their empire down. Her breath caught. Samuel's death wasn't just vengeance. It was a cover-up. The letter burned in her mind, a secret tying her to this stranger, a man whose touch still lingered in her skin's memory. She moved to check his bandages, her fingers brushing his chest, the contact stirring a forbidden warmth she fought to ignore. Her blouse, loose from the night's work, traced the swell of her breasts as she leaned close, her breath quickening. Wyatt's eyes flickered, catching hers, a silent acknowledgement of the line they'd nearly crossed, but danger loomed larger than desire. Clara stepped back, her heart a war drum, and began fortifying the cabin. She dragged logs to bar the door, her muscles flexing, her hips swaying with each heavy lift, the morning light catching the sheen of sweat on her collarbone. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a warning. Silas was close, and he'd kill to keep that letter buried. A shadow moved outside, too quick for a deer. Clara froze, rifle raised, her pulse racing. Wyatt struggled to his feet, his hand on his Colt, though his strength wavered. "Silas Kane," he muttered. "He was your pa's friend once. Turned on him for gold. Now he wants me gone." Clara's jaw tightened. Silas, the man who'd sat at her father's table, laughing years ago. Betrayal cut deeper than any arrow. But another figure haunted her thoughts. Eli Ramsey, Silas's right hand, a man her father had spared from a noose. Did he hunt her now, or did some shred of loyalty linger? The cabin grew still, the air thick with unspoken truths. Clara handed Wyatt a cup of water, her fingers grazing his, a fleeting touch that sparked a memory of their bodies entwined under the blanket. "You knew my pa," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What else do you know?" Wyatt's eyes darkened, holding a secret heavier than the letter. "He said you were his fire," he replied, "and I'm starting to see why." Her heart twisted, torn between grief and a pull toward this man who carried her father's ghost. A twig snapped outside, sharp as a gunshot. Clara spun, rifle aimed at the door. Shadows shifted beyond the window. 2, maybe 3 men. Silas's voice cut through the dawn, cold and taunting. "Clara Boone, you've got something I want. Hand him over, and you walk away." Her grip tightened, her resolve steel. Wyatt staggered to her side, his hand steadying on her shoulder, their closeness a defiance of the danger outside. But what did Silas know? Was it just the letter, or something more? A secret buried in the blood-soaked earth? The cabin walls seemed to close in, and Clara knew the fight was coming, whether she was ready or not. The Montana dawn bled crimson through the pines, a harbinger of death closing in. Clara Boone knelt by her cabin's window, rifle steady, her green eyes cutting through the haze. Silas Kane's voice sliced the air, venomous and personal. "Clara Boone, you think you're your father's shadow?" Samuel begged before I cut him down. "Hand over the marshal, or you'll join him." Her heart twisted, rage flaring at the betrayal. Silas, her father's friend, his killer. Wyatt Callahan, propped against the wall, gripped his Colt, his fever-worn face taut with defiance. Their bond, forged in her bare warmth hours before, held them now, a fragile shield against the storm. Silas's men moved like specters in the mist, their boots crunching frost. Clara had made her cabin a fortress. Logs braced the door, windows narrowed, stakes sharpened and buried in the earth. Her hands, calloused yet graceful, tightened on her rifle, the morning light catching the slender curve of her neck, sweat gleaming as she braced for war. Wyatt's gaze lingered, a flicker of hunger he couldn't bury, her touch from the night still burning in his skin. "Cover the door," she said, her voice low, steady, but threaded, with fear, not for her life, but for the truth they carried. A torch arced through the sky, igniting the roof with a hungry roar. Gunfire erupted, bullets splintering wood as Silas's men charged. Clara fired, her shot felling a shadow in the dirt, the rifle's recoil bruising her shoulder. Wyatt's Colt barked, his aim steady despite his trembling frame, their movements a desperate harmony. Smoke thickened, the fire above crackling. Clara scrambled to douse it, water splashing from her bucket, her hands slick and trembling, her neck arched as she fought the blaze. A bullet grazed her wrist, blood dripping, but she pressed on, Wyatt's hand catching hers to steady her, a fleeting touch that anchored them amid chaos. Eli Ramsey stepped from the mist, his scarred face a map of guilt. Clara's breath hitched. Her father had saved him from a noose, a debt now tested. "Silas wants the letter," Eli said, rifle raised but unsteady. "And you, Clara, for defying him." Wyatt tensed, his hand on his gun, but Clara saw the fracture in Eli's eyes. "Pa trusted you," she said, her voice a blade. "Don't spit on his grave." Eli wavered, torn by shame. Silas's shout, "Ramsey, end it!" forced his choice. Eli fired, not at Clara but at a hunter beside him, his betrayal a spark of redemption. Silas's revolver flashed and Eli fell, blood pooling in the frost. The fight raged on, relentless. Clara's trap snared one man, his scream piercing the dawn, but the fire spread, licking the walls. Wyatt stumbled, his strength fading, yet he reloaded, his shoulder brushing Clara's, their closeness a defiance of death. "The letter," he rasped, clutching it. "If we go down, burn it." Clara's eyes blazed. "We don't go down." Her words were a vow, fueled by her father's blood, by the man who'd seen her soul bare. The door shuddered, Silas's men ramming it with a log. His voice taunted again, colder now. "Samuel's girl, you'll pay for his sins." Clara's rifle jammed, her heart lurching. The flames roared above, the cabin groaning. Wyatt gripped her arm, their faces close, breath tangled in the smoke. What sin did Silas mean? The letter, or a darker truth buried in her father's past? As the door cracked, Clara drew her knife, her body coiled like a spring, ready to fight to her last. The frontier demanded blood, and hers burned to answer. The Montana dawn choked on smoke, the cabin a crumbling pyre, as Silas Kane's men splintered the door. Clara Boone stood, knife gleaming, her green eyes fierce with her father's fire. Wyatt Callahan, weak but defiant, pressed close, his Colt ready, their shoulders brushing, a spark of the warmth that had bound them in the night. Silas charged, his blade aimed at Wyatt, snarling, "For Samuel's sins!" Clara struck first, her knife slashing his arm, blood staining the floor. Wyatt's shot grazed Silas's shoulder, and together they forced him back into the frost. The hunters wavered, one caught in Clara's traps, his scream swallowed by the blaze. Clara's blade found Silas's side, and he fell, his eyes bitter, seeing Samuel in her. Wyatt pinned him, the letter clutched tight. "Your empire's dust," he said, voice raw. Clara bound Silas, her wrists deft, gleaming with sweat in the firelight, her strength a quiet beauty amid ruin. The cabin collapsed, but they dragged Silas to the pines, the letter safe. In Helena, they delivered him to marshals, the letter exposing the Blackthorn gang's rot. A judge fell. Samuel's name cleared. Clara, now deputy marshal, stood by Wyatt, their bond sealed in blood. "Pa would have been proud," she said, her voice soft, eyes tracing Wyatt's face. He nodded, his hand grazing hers. "He said you were his fire. I see it now." Her heart caught, hope and grief tangling at a letter's hint. Her mother might live. They rebuilt her cabin's frame, their hands brushing, a promise under the wide sky. The frontier had taken Eli, her home, but Clara carried Samuel's light. A dawn beam lit their joined hands, a scar on the land healed. Tell us where you're writing from in the comments, and if Clara's fire stirs you, hit subscribe. The frontier's tales burn on.